Good morning, everybody. My name is Robin Cline. I am the assistant director at NeighborSpace in Chicago, and we thought we would do a magical introduction so that you would all understand how you can make real life nature happen in your very own Zoom office in your closet. So I'm going to give this flower, this natural flower that I have found in my house, over to my fellow presenter, Daniella Pereira.
Hold on, let me grab it. Oh my goodness, look at what it turned into. Wow, fabulous. Thank you so much. I was really looking forward to starting. So I'm Daniella Pereira. I'm the Vice President of Community Conservation at Openlands, and really happy to be with you all this Friday morning. Sean, I feel like I want to pass you these now too. Here you go.
Okay. Oh. Thanks, Daniella. Hope we can bury this later. Hi, I'm Sean Shaffer. I'm the Nature Engagement Specialist with the Park District. So I make piles of logs and sticks that kids can play with and create and recreate their own play space over and over again. Happy to see you all today. Good morning, choir. Ready for the sermon? I'm here to start by telling you how important nature is. So hopefully we can skip a few steps there. I'm going to tell all you guys who play with sticks how fun and important it is to play with sticks. So that's my job today. Could I go to the next slide, please, Robin? So I want to start with a joke. I'm going to win you over with my humor. Here's an actual product I found in the store. Fortunately, it was in a store that sells products that weren't sold at other places. It is a stick that is shaped like a stick, and it's made out of sticks, and you can buy it so your dog doesn't get splinters because it's a safe stick. So yeah, feel free to laugh. This is a product to keep our dogs safe from sticks. And just kind of a little statement about like where we are in society and protecting our kids and how our kids don't really want to be protected, especially from sticks, how much they need sticks. So can you all imagine some other product that is shaped like a stick, made out of a stick, can be used as a stick and possibly free? Yes, next please. So here's the best text I've ever seen on nature play. A lot of PhD and a lot of colleges have written about it, but here's the only book you need to read about nature play. Not a stick, just like the former picture was not a stick. In this book, a little piglet has a stick and is doing something crazy with it on every page, and there's this adult voice from off the page screaming, "You'll put your eye out. Be careful. What are you doing?" And all sorts of nonsensical things that is probably the most dangerous thing to this piglet, distracting them while they're playing. And the point is, the kids have this magic world, just like our magic introduction. That stick can be all sorts of things. It can be a fishing rod, a sword, a horse, all these things that we can't see. And that's the real kind of the main tenet of nature play. Could we go to the next slide, please, Robin? Here we see a playground that's made of sticks, but it's not nature play. So in your head, I wish we had more time and I could kind of gather, but in your head, make a list of verbs. What can you do with this piece, this nature play element, or this playground element? This isn't nature play, although it's kind of attempting to be. You can throw it in the chat or just kind of like say it out loud. You see a swing there. And then we're going to compare it to the next slide, which is a pop-up nature play space. This is Pasteur Park. This is actually a partnership with Openlands that we did. We just put all these sticks out in the park and we stepped back. Make another list of verbs, what you see going on here. Hopefully you'll see that every child has kind of found their own spot, their own thing to do, whether it be active, passive, kind of working one-on-one with someone, constructing. You see kind of a shelter going on in the back, obstacle course. And the two kids who are balancing. I love to see this because this is the seesaw is probably the first element built when we leave these things out in the park. The seesaw is automatically first. And what better analogy, what direct analogy for every relationship you'll ever have? Every new partnership you should make should take place on a seesaw. Before you get married, you should be on a seesaw, right? You need to know what your partner's going to do. Are they trying to bounce you off? Are you working together? Are they leaning in, leaning out? All these things are important, and it all starts on the seesaw. Could we see the next slide, please, Robin? Here's another pop-up space, which might make you a little nervous at first. But you can see what's happening here. Unlike King of the Hill, which is what might happen in a typical playground, these kids are working together. They're helping each other out. They're making it easier for them to get to the top. And as we know from research done by Chicago's own Jessica Fong in a NeighborSpace space, she did some research with her preschoolers and found out that nature play, the language used during nature play is richer, it's cooperative. These kids are working together to achieve a common goal. They're not working against each other. We know from other research that nature play is directed by the most creative children, not the most aggressive children. And here's a good time to talk about risk. If anyone is kind of a little nervous about this, the kids made this choice to kind of build and go up on top of the tallest, hardest area they could. And that was their choice. So that they're taking a risk, and a risk has a benefit to it. It has a reward. It has a victory that comes with it, whether they accomplish that goal or not, as opposed to a hazard. And in this particular shot, I saw a hazard as I was kind of watching around. And when I'm working these nature play spaces, my main job is to keep the adults at bay. That's mostly what I do. Keep the play unadulterated. I just distract them. Like, look how cool they are. Look how strong they are. Look what they're doing. Oh, go look at that bird over there. Look at that shiny, but I did see that they built this ramp on this that red log, which I stole from the or the Flower and Garden show. Pulled it out of a dumpster at the end. They built a surface on this kind of rolling object. So I just took a wedge and went over there and kicked it under the log and stepped back. Hazard removed. Continue playing. The next shot will show you another just kind of perfect little nature play scene. So we're in Big Marsh now, and these kids came to explore nature. So we did some kind of more traditional kind of looking for tracks and looking, identifying plants. And one of our stations was kind of this nature play area. So the stewards there, just like you guys, had provided all these great loose parts. There's these piles of buckthorn, not just for burning. It's great loose parts. So these kids were able to kind of build and follow their instincts, because how much longer have we been out in the wild using sticks to build our shelter, to make our fire, to kind of clean our water, to hunt, to gather? Sticks are part of our life, and this play is life or death kind of stuff. This play is hardly playful. This is how we got where we are on the planet. And this guy's story in particular, the guy in the middle with the thumb, this branch behind them, the horizontal branch, one of his classmates would go up there and hang from it, be the sloth, right? And the branch would go down so much that no one else could hang on it. So he fixed the problem. He found the perfect fork branch and jammed it under that branch, and now 6-8 kids could sloth all together. He saved the day. That was his victory, and that probably would have happened in a traditional playground. The next picture is of Gabriel. And Gabriel, here he is. We have this is in Walking Stick Woods, so this is a mulch pile. So it was there to kind of create the trails, and in the meantime, it was its own nature play space. He decided to take this wagon of straw on the path of most resistance, right, over the hill. Could have gone around. Anyone else would have, because that'd be easiest, but not Gabriel. And so he started dragging this over, and you can see he got in this kind of this Sisyphus position where he couldn't go further up, couldn't go further back. But this was his choice. He wanted to do this. This was his goal. So no hazard here, and he just wanted to accomplish it. I saw this going on. This is before I knew better. And I wanted to help him, right? Like, oh, he wants to get the wagon over hill. That's the goal. And I was going to go help him. And Teresa Weed walked behind me and just whispered, just loud enough for me, don't steal his victory. Because that's what I was about to do. I was about to help him get that wagon over the hill, but that wasn't his goal at all. What I would have done is I would have gotten the wagon over the hill and I would have reminded him, you're not big enough. You're not strong enough. You needed me. Because really that's the biggest message of nature play. How often in a kid's world today do they get to make their own choice about what they do, to be powerful, to be strong, to take those risks and reap all those rewards and victories for themselves? So getting the wagon over the hill wasn't really the goal at all. It was to prove to him that he could do it. And so these are the main tenets of nature play. Could we see the next slide, please? All right, and here's how we do it at the oh, have I convinced everyone? Choir, are you all, singing in unison? Okay, so here's how we do it at the Chicago Park District. So I know this is a little blurry, a little hard to see. Sorry for that. It starts with a one-page document. Like, here's my spot in the park. Here's where I'm thinking. And there hasn't been a park that I've gone to where that spot isn't obvious. And it's usually the spot that's kind of not used. It's like shady. It may be muddy. Grass doesn't grow there. All those things are perfect because that's the first thing I would do when I came in. Mud, hey, that's a loose part. All those loose parts that the kids can manipulate, move around, that's a bonus. Natural borders. And so we go in and I usually meet with the park advisory committee, sometimes the director, usually the park's coming to me, sometimes I go to the park, and we find that spot. And we just say, we're thinking here, we run it by our own planning department, make sure there's no dog casino going in that spot, and we get the okay, and then we can move on to the next step. And the next step is a checklist. Next slide, where we can, again, it's hard to see, and maybe it's blurry on purpose because it's ever evolving. As we're growing, we're learning new things, we're inventing new ways. We want to make sure the community knows, all of the community, that doesn't just pop in there overnight. It doesn't happen to the park, but it grows from the park. So we go in and we look at that spot, make sure we're not displacing anything else that happens there that we didn't know about. We make sure that there's a petition. We make sure that there's activities in that space as we go. We make sure that we know who all the stakeholders are, and it's not just the kids. Nature play is great for kids, but it actually works for everyone. Works for kids of all ages. But we start with the kids, whether they be the scout groups, the schools, the homeschoolers, the park programs, and we see who it is, and we start gathering. Back when, remember gathering? Aww. And we gather and we bring out our nature play kits, which is the next slide. Invented by Kathleen Solar. These nature play kits are kind of a small scale of like all the parts that we see, that you saw in the pop-up play, the parts that will go in the ground, some will be rooted, some will be made to move around. And we rely on the play experts. We rely on the kids. And they need no direction. All they need is permission, which is really the biggest rule of nature play. So we stand back, we give them these kits and say, what do you think would be fun? In the next slide, you'll see that we try to do it as often as possible in the space itself so that the kids can kind of picture, they can visualize where we are. So here now we're in Wrightwood Park, in the space, on the ground, outside. So this is a park where the school lets out and the kids are automatically in the park. And we just put these kits down and stood back. We document as much as we can, like Reggio style, just writing down exactly what the kids say, their comments, kind of, again, unadulterated, and take lots and lots of pictures. And as you'll see, like the young man to the left, his picture will appear in the later on. So remember that one, his circle of logs with the clay in the middle. And we do this a couple times if we can. So what we're doing here is the kids get to play. We get to see their ideas. The community gets to see, something's happening, that kind of like that muddy area that no one uses. Something must be happening. What's going on? And any adult who sees the kids play gets to see that this kind of play is inherently different. You know, this is not playground play. This is different. It's a whole different species of play. The rules are different here. So if you're keeping score, that's a win-win-win, I believe. So just like that stick, that can be the fishing rod, the sword, the horse, everything here that you'll see, everything in nature play has 4 jobs to do simultaneously, plus the other jobs that kids will invent and then I will steal later. So the next picture, oh yeah, so not just for kids. So here we are in Mount Vernon Elementary, wonderful school. Again, the kids get out of, when they walk out of Mount Vernon, they're in Jackie Robinson Park. Thank you, Colleen McVeigh, for introducing me to this school. These are 8th graders. They're now freshmen in high school, and they're not done with this project that they started in 6th grade. They wanted Miss Penderbay, their wonderful teacher, since 6th grade, has been working with them to leave a legacy for the youngest kids, the kindergartners in their same school that they work with every Friday. So there's a built-in relationship. And on their own, I can take no credit for it, dang it. These 6th graders decided that nature play would be the best legacy to leave for their kids. They did all the research to find out that nature play is great for kids, from their health to their, you know, socialization, to their gross motor skills, their fine motor skills, to their core strength. And they've been doing this plan all along. So I came in at the last minute and kind of are going to help them with the Nature Conservancy to kind of build a nature play space. So they're still play experts. In the next slide, you'll see the next step. We bring in that pop-up play. So the pop-up play, we want to make that an event too. So here we are at Horner Park. We bring in the big pieces so the kids can play on a whole different scale. And again, we're bringing attention. So we link this with the festival that happens at the park. So in one afternoon, you can get all the signatures for your petition. We can bring attention to the nature play space that's coming. And again, the parents can see that this kind of play is different. Another benefit, in the next slide, you'll see, I think we're back at Mount Vernon Elementary and Jackie Robinson. When you're playing with the full scale objects too, you're just playing at a different level. So here the kids invented like a permanent jump rope exhibit. They tied some rope that we brought out there, again, a loose part, tied either end to a tree. And now this nature play space always has a jump rope in it. It can be a slack line, you can build shelters on it. Again, that rope is doing 4 things. A great idea I never would have come up with, but I'm definitely stealing. In the next slide, you'll see the voting process. So once we get these elements, once we see all these drawings and the pictures and the scale models, we vote on common elements. And themes arise, like the circle of, and we vote on what they are. So the next slide, you'll see this is one way of doing it, an informal way. So that kid's drawing of like the circle of logs, and the council ring. So we're using the kids' pictures, and here they're only voting with a positive. They're voting with a green check. So you can't vote against something. So it's only positive stuff. And we go in and see the ones with the most green checks on it. And those are the ones we'll kind of put in the map. And the beauty of this too is like the kids can see their work in the final product. When they see that circle of logs in the ground, they can authentically say, that was my idea. Putting a log in the ground, I invented that. So the next slides, and I'll try to speed up a little bit. These are some of our blueprints that we use. So it looks like a pretty standard blueprint, although with yarn and beans and gravel. The next one, this is from Mount Vernon. That works. I can show this to the guys with a chainsaw. That works. Our spaces are meant to change and move around. So when the trees come off the back of the truck, not from the tree warehouse, right? I can't order a 36 long oak, right? They work with what we get. So that element is kind of built in. You can see the next one. So this works too. This is Clark Park. So this is a scout troop, mostly did this one. Those little Leopold benches, they're made out of Starbucks stir straws. So this works too, the natural spire that represents mulch piles. So not just for Gabriel, right? A challenge for everyone. Loose parts that will provide space all around. this works too. This works as a plan. And the next one you'll see, I think we're back at Horner Park, plantings. So it's harder to see in the other ones, but we would like to do half of our spaces as kind of natural plantings. So we have kind of like a small space devoted to the kind of nature play, right? Devoted to the kind of activity that we know leads to kids valuing their environment, their natural area, and wanting to protect it as an adult. So these are kind of steward breeding spaces. These are spaces that keep the renewable resource of you guys, of stewards, going. So they're set aside natural areas meant to be kind of played and manipulated. And yes, that does say robot in the heads. The Horner Park Nature's Play Space are getting robot heads. That's correct. In the next shot, I'll try to go a little faster. So yes, the heart of every Nature's Play Space, here's Cornell Park down by Science and Industry, are the loose parts. That log the kids on, we go way back. That log and I spent a week and a half at the Flower and Garden Show doing nature play inside. Still doing its job. And I think the trees too, much prefer to play than being turned into mulch and carried around the city. So this is Cornell Park. In the heart of every one of our nature play spaces are the loose parts and manipulative. But what's fun to see, even though my job is to make piles of logs around the city, they all definitely have their own character based on the community. So the next shot is of one of the kids' designs of Eugene Field. And this is a unique spot. It's a triangular space. And the hypotenuse of this triangle is the river, the North Branch. And so this child, as you can see, wanted a pirate ship, a raft. It's all there. So they've used some of the wooden pieces. Another kid on this project wanted a slide that went down into the river. Unfortunately, we did not do that. But so from that pirate ship, right, for this nautical theme, we went to the drawings, which is the next slide. And you can see I did like a more traditional, more prescriptive kind of ship when we thought pulleys and masts and maybe like that big wheel they can steer. But it was a little too kind of like guiding, a little too guiding. And so we interpreted it as these logs in the ground with a rope, which I do have rules. I do have some rules. I can't buy helicopters like Robin can, but I do have these rules like the planning department, that ship, that drawing down below, it's a fence. And if the kids climb on that fence, darn kids. So these are kind of some of the ways we can do, but it's like just the element, just the skeleton, just like that stick that's all the kids need to kind of keep building on it and to complete it. They can balance on it. They can swing on it. And the final product, as you can see, and I am going overtime. There it is. So we got to build it. We got to add a rope. Another great renewable resource that we have are those broken wheelbarrows, which if you set in the ground is a kid-sized boat. It can hold elements. So again, doing three things all at once. All right, we'll have to go. If you go to the next one, you can see some other elements where we kind of incorporated the nautical theme. A stage, the bench is a common thing. I'm a department of one. I do all I can by asking people favors. And so, but my favors are usually pretty fun. Hey guys, with the chainsaws, want to help me turn the stage into a raft? So perfect spot for Tom Sawyer to do his tap dancing. Next slide, you'll see, looks like a bridge. It's actually another fence, another landscape feature where the kids can kind of walk the plank, kind of incorporate the play. They can climb, they can billy goat gruff. The next slide, you'll see they wanted a monster. So this is our river monster, complete with tentacles. So we're able to kind of give it some tentacles, and we just found this log out there that was just waiting to play. Next one. You can see, yes, how we're still doing it this last year and during the derecho. So this is when all those trees came down in that terrible storm over the weekend. Terrible inconvenience for everyone, great for business for me. Overnight, I provided every park in the city with loose parts and climbing logs. but they wouldn't let me retire. So here's what came down in Horner Park. I've definitely got two parks interested because when we started hauling the trees away, the kids were like, no, that was our, you can't imagine all the time we spent there. And even during COVID, even during not being able to, oh, and I'm sorry, the next shot, you can see those loose parts definitely did not go to waste. Here's the Wells Park summer camp, which became a child labor camp, as we went around racing against the chippers, kind of haul all those parts in and kind of bring them over to the loose parts playground. We still gathered, as you can see by the next shot, despite the no gathering orders, in small pods. So here, this young woman at Mount Vernon found a way of being 6 feet away from everybody. Very clever. In small pods with masks. The next shot you'll see is from Wentworth Park, I think. Yep. So in small pods and still masking. And just the next shot, you'll see how resilient all these kids are. So these kids used all their loose parts in this pop-up play to make a bakery. And here's the cashier. This is Brianne, my friend. And she is getting her temperature checked before she's allowed to come in to the bakery shop that the kids made up. So they've already incorporated this play into theirs. In the next shot, we can see, yes, this is how we maintain these spots. It's active, they're growing. So the forestry department saved time by dumping all of their trimmings, and the kids in a loose part party palooza are turning it into the loose parts, resupplying their own park, and saving our own internal department's money. The next shot, you'll see a family bringing their log that they liberated from this pile into the space. So again, if you count all the wins, the kids got to use these dangerous tools. They were trusted. They get to resupply their own park, re-establishing their connection with it. And that log is special. That's their log. They built it. So risk, but look at all the benefits that are coming out of that. We're learning other lessons internally. In the next shot, you think you can see the logs being delivered to Horner Park. So even before it's a nature play space, we're bringing the logs in. So we're moving the logs once. Our forestry department and natural resources have a database that we call the log. So when a tree comes down, instead of moving it somewhere to be stored or turned into mulch and then taken somewhere else, we can save money and energy by taking it directly to the spot where it's going to be used next. So it's moved once. And this is a shot from like 7 in the morning with the logs coming. This next shot and my last shot is later that same day. And there's a Montessori school across the street who uses this. Yep. So while the logs are waiting to become nature play, they are nature play. So they're being used, they're being loved. The school sent me a text thanking me, like, hey, we're done. I'm like, actually, some assembly required, but enjoy. So even as the parts are waiting to be nature play, they're still fun. They're still the challenge. And all we need to give the kids is permission. Thanks. Sorry I went over.
Hi, everybody. Sean's picture of a safer and less messy stick. I think many of us are all familiar with the idea of loose parts and pieces that can be moved around in a space, played with, to represent other things. And when talking about setting the conditions for nature play, like Sean talked about, loose parts is an important vocabulary phrase. It's not a new idea, but depending on the historical context, like many ideas, its meaning and novelty can change over time. And I'm going to reference a story from the 90s when a friend of mine who would somehow know some obscure fact would point to his head and say, it's like the internet up here. I am going to point to my head in this particular time in history and say, it's like loose parts up here. Because for this particular presentation, I want to think about the way we think about planning. Can we move stuff around in our heads? Can we move stuff around in our heads when we can't move stuff around in real space? And if so, can we call that an adult version of loose part play? So I work for the organization NeighborSpace, a community managed open space land trust in Chicago. We've been around for almost 25 years, and we're a response to an open space think tank who wanted to identify the undocumented places in the city that were being used for open space. And so NeighborSpace was founded as a non-for-profit that would protect these community efforts that were happening all throughout Chicago. So in the beginning, we protected 4 spaces in 1997, and now we are up to 120 plus 15 to 20 more. And one of our big initiatives of some of the spaces that are in development and being protected is a project called the West Side Nature Play Network, Every Child in Nature Every Day. This West Side Nature Play Network works with 3 communities, Austin, Garfield Park, and Lawndale, to identify 6 new nature play community managed sites across the city over the next 5 years. And we have community members, community groups who already are stewarding these spaces, turning these spaces into nature play spaces. And we are in the process of planning for these 6 new spaces. And then the pandemic hit. And so we are nature play planning in a pandemic. And I wanted to share a few of the observations and a few of the things that have happened over that time. And I'm going to talk really fast so that I can get, so that we can all get a chance to hear what Daniella has to say. We developed signage for our gardens, much along the same lines as you would put beach flags up when the water is safe or not. So we have safe practices to keep a garden open. And unfortunately, we have safe practices to keep a garden closed. And I just want to call attention to our shovel distance apart optic, which we are really excited about. And then we also created, because we had to close down our nature play sites in accordance with the city of Chicago Park District and the Chicago Public Schools, we tried to identify available spaces that were capable of being activated. And we created a DIY sidewalk chalk nature obstacle course so that folks could go out to stand in front of their apartment buildings, because many people didn't have the opportunity to drive to the forest preserves over the last 9 months, and create their own DIY sidewalk chalk obstacle course with loose parts. Nature play planning in a pandemic. We taught a lot of people how to use Zoom over the last 9 months. And we are currently using our closets to Zoom together and plan community play gardens. As one of the prior ways that we work together, I wanted to call attention to some of the things that Sean was talking about in terms of materials and circumstance. You really can't move giant 6-foot boulders around to just chuck it out and test it in the space. You can't figure out what something's going to look like when it weighs 400 pounds. So there are ways that you can use loose parts to design a space. These pieces of material are loose parts that were created to scale of some of the natural logs and wood pieces that we had to create the Lawndale Community Garden. And we were able to use these particular loose part sticks to arrange a nature play perimeter in Lawndale. Now fast forward to where we are right now. Mason Community Play Garden in Austin is in the midst of planning their community play garden. And they're doing a very nice combination of door-to-door drop-offs and Zoom trainings. So as far as the planning goes, the community leader decided to drop off blank pieces of paper for folks to draw their visions. And then we would all convene again for multiple breakout meetings to talk on Zoom about what people were having their most enthusiastic responses to. And 3 of those drawings are going to be discussed tomorrow morning, so I'll report back. Nature play planning in a pandemic, community planning. I propose that the Post-it is a new loose part, especially now that we're in this new stage of doing a lot of things virtually. There are multiple collaborative whiteboards that are using the digital Post-it as a way for folks to all weigh in at the same time about what they are thinking about how a space might look and might be. I want to particularly draw attention to this screenshot of Drake Community Garden concept meeting, where the community leaders came together and voted on obstacle courses and what pictures they wanted to see in their space. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about the problems of this. But what I want to show you is that this particular collaborative whiteboard named Mural was able to collect votes that were blind votes. So it's one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is voting in this time of pandemic planning, and how when you vote, a vote really does need to be private for it to be the truest test of what a community really wants. When I'm in my closet thinking during this time, I'm reflecting on the methods that we have been using in terms of planning and thinking about why it really matters to critique the methods that we've been using as far as planning. And that is actually a bit of playing for us. For adults, moving things around in space in our heads is a method of loose part play. I wanted to share this picture so that we can all look at how an idea can simply be a better idea if it's in a different color, more legible, and has a few stars next to it. So when we think about our planning and when we reflect on our methods, we look back at how we've been collecting opinions and we identify what's wrong with the way we have been making group decisions up to this point. This is a picture of one of our gardens voting on which vegetables they want to collaboratively plant in one of their community gardens. And if I were to do it again, I would do it different. Again, here's a classic example of ways in which sometimes photos are posted on walls for kids to vote on, and a classic example of how if you include a slide in a picture in nature play planning, it's kind of like a large screen TV in a bar. You may not want to look at it, but you will not be able to not look at it. And when we think about what kind of images we're creating for kids to vote on, it's really important for us to set the right conditions so that we recognize that sometimes a child who doesn't know what nature play is will need to know what nature play is before they vote on something. And so the kind of work that Sean is doing in terms of these pop-up play parks is really, really important, so that when you see a pile of mulch next to a fun slide, you've had an experience with how a pile of mulch is actually much more fun than a multicolored fun slide. I wanted to talk quickly about the wisdom of crowds. This is really important in this time where we're thinking about how we think about, sorry, one here. How we think about how our crowds are wise. And some of you may be familiar with this particular experiment where a large crowd guessed the weight of an ox at the beginning of the 1900s. And when the experimenters figured these 300 guesses into a mean, they found a remarkably accurate guess. But the thing that you don't often hear about this scenario is that you need to have blind voting requirements in place for this kind of wisdom of the crowds to work. And once people see what other people are voting on, once you bring social influence into the equation, the wisdom of the crowd is not that wise anymore. So I wish that we could linger a little bit slower on all of these thoughts about how to make our crowds wiser. But I know we're in a kind of a rush. So a final observation in this time of COVID is that priorities are shifting, language is shifting, community needs are shifting. When we look at things about how we're voting, we are creating circumstances where we need to recognize that by me putting children in this particular voting concept meeting, I automatically made folks want to vote for these particular images because I kind of manipulated them into wanting to vote on something where there were kids walking. And we need to be aware of the ways in which we've set our voting up to meet the needs of what we want to actually push through and have happen in our play spaces. A final observation again is that in this time of COVID, our priorities are shifting, our language is shifting, community needs are shifting, and different words and phrases resonate differently with communities depending on their priorities and their experiences. And one of the things that we've been noticing is that some communities are just not interested in the phrase nature play, but they are interested in the phrase intergenerational community gathering place. they are interested in outdoor family space where neighbors can come together. And everyone, regardless of age, has something they can do together while they work in these community spaces. So I think as we move forward and our needs assessment are shifting, especially as it relates to COVID-19, I want to thank you all for listening to my loose parts at work. And I apologize for rushing so quickly, but I'm going to introduce my next colleague, Daniella Pereira from Openlands.
Thank you, Robin. Perfect. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about policy loosely and what policy looks like around nature play during this time of COVID. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what Openlands has been doing, working on with schools. Next slide, please. So in my neighborhood, in the evening last year, I would see tons of families outside walking around up and down the blocks. And, you know, despite all the fear and danger and anxiety people were feeling about the global health crisis, you know, I think that families started realizing this time was a time of slowdown, to stop overcommitted schedules and really spending time together. And it was fabulous to do so, just walking around the blocks, and for those who have access to get out into nature. Next slide, please. But as we realize, you know, many Chicago residents actually don't have access to green space. You know, 10% of our city's population does not live within a half mile of a park. The city of Chicago has less than half the playgrounds for a population our size. And in some cases, you know, heightened crime can limit what type of access there is available to parks close to your house. Those most affected by the lack of parks are in the lowest quarter for median household income. Next slide. At the same time, Chicago Public Schools is one of the largest public owners of impermeable space in the city. I know that was a lot. Largest public owners of impermeable space in the city. Many of these schools lack playgrounds or green space altogether. In other cases, like these schoolyards were left just in disrepair or turned into parking lots, as you could see here. Wadsworth, by the way, is beautiful right now. This was prior to them recreating this whole space. But the facilities at a lot of our city's elementary schools don't have adequate space for any type of outdoor recess or PE programs. Next, please. So this really highlights the intersection of inadequate green space and parks, and it really does affect primarily students of color in economically disadvantaged neighborhoods. So yes, you know, conservation is very important to probably all of us who are a part of this conference, these 2 weekends, but it's not enough. We're at the point where we actually now need to create nature. And I think that that's evident in what you're seeing with all of us presenters today. Next slide, please. So more than a decade ago, Openlands began to utilize something called an open space impact fee. And we worked with Chicago Public Schools to build over 70 unique gardens. So the school does get to help design these. They were smaller spaces, but this was one of them at Morrill Elementary. Others, you know, had actual vegetable gardens in there, whatever that school wanted. At the same time, there is another organization called Healthy Schools Campaign, and they are dedicated to supporting healthy students. They were advocating to reinstate recess. Believe it or not, recess was not mandatory at Chicago Public Schools for like 20 or 30 years, which to me, they got it. Was not at the facilities as in play. So this actually provided a really excellent opportunity for us to start focusing on what a green schoolyard program would look like. Next slide, please. So at the same time, we were, Healthy Schools Campaign and Openlands is talking about this. The Department of Water Management for the city and Metropolitan Water Reclamation District were under mandates where they needed to actually keep water on site during peak storms, meaning like they didn't want it to go in the sewers because when the sewers back up and fill up, it either bypasses getting cleaned or it backs up into people's basements. So they had a mandate to actually create green infrastructure. We wanted to, green up these schoolyards. Healthy Schools Campaign wanted to create more of these spaces for kids to actually get outside and have PE and recess. And so Space to Grow was born. And with this, both Openlands and Healthy Schools Campaign do get to manage the program, and the capital partners, as you see here, are the public agencies who provide the leadership, the expertise, and the funding. Next slide, please. So here's one of the green schoolyard transformations. This is Grissom Elementary in Hegewisch. We transformed these underutilized asphalt lots. They need to be at least 30,000 square feet. And because we pull in the community to really design this with us, not only the school community, but the surrounding community, this becomes shared green space that the community can use after school is out. And it also stores water, storm water there, so that the flooding isn't actually coming up through people's basements. Next slide, please. So 25 of the 34 schoolyards have already been built. 5 more are going to be built this summer. And in total, all of 34 schools will capture over 5 million gallons of stormwater at any given time. Next slide, please. There was a formal evaluation of the Space to Grow schoolyards, and they found some really positive benefits, that there was increased physical activity, positive social interactions, high teacher morale, increased safety, less bullying, and that teacher and student relations actually improved. Greening schoolyards may be one of the most cost-effective ways to also raise student test scores. What people have found out nationally is that natural schoolyards encourage more egalitarian play, and are made available to that community so that if they don't have access to a park close by, they have a park right in their schoolyard. Next step, please. So this is more about where the policy piece comes in. It is baby steps for change. So, having an asphalt schoolyard for probably the last 20, 30 or more years, maintenance on it has been pretty minimal. And so now you're changing it up, that you're creating these spaces that need a lot more maintenance, not a ton, but you need somebody to go water plants. You need to make sure that if something falls apart, that it's fixed up. And so this has been a work in progress with CPS administration. Everyone is getting to understand it, and that's why we pull in the administration right away so that they understand that in order to have one of these schools, there are going to be some things that do need to change and do need to be cared for. Next slide, please. And then there's huge social barriers. Some of it, similar to what Robin said, is some of the kids really haven't played with, in nature play. So how could they choose nature play for some of these spaces? Safety is huge, not only like safety in the neighborhood, but like from getting, from having kids fall and risk. Those are words that traditionally teachers, principals, and administration really don't want to be part of the vocabulary for their outdoor spaces. So it's really building and working with people. And then unfortunately, in-person instruction at CPS had stopped. I believe Monday, some kids will be going back, but a lot of these playgrounds and green schoolyards are still closed off. Next one, please. So when we talk about social barriers, you really need to start talking about what is the relationship that you're building here. And it's not just coming in for that quick design and let's get this in the ground, but it's what is the long-term relationship that you could have with the parents, with the teachers, and with the kids to make sure that they feel comfortable being able to utilize these spaces, and to even bring in community groups and organizations close by to access and use these spaces too, because the more people that are on these green schoolyards, the more they will be cared for, the more safe they will be, and the more community cohesion will happen. So it's all baby steps. Next slide, please. Sean did show you this. We set up at Pasture Park for a summer camp. This was, Chicago Park District brought all these loose parts, and all of the parents and counselors were standing there and said, well, what do we do? And Sean just said, we just stand here, let them figure it out themselves. And this is what they created on their own. And it was just I think a beautiful moment to be able to pull back the adults to really start looking at the creativity, at the fascination, at how many children were actually engaged in this type of play by being able to do this. Now, loose parts is not something easy to bring into Chicago Public Schools yet. Some schools do have it. Others need a little bit of time, and I'll tell you about a workshop right at the end of our talk that we're going to be inviting you all and any teachers that you know to it. So one of the things that Openlands has done for a very long time is that we teach teachers how to teach outside. You don't only have to teach science outside or being able to sit down and read a book quietly somewhere. You can teach so many different subjects, and it's really getting teachers comfortable with accessing it and making sure that they understand, yes, we know sometimes you have to teach to certain standards. You could still do that by using an outdoor classroom. The other thing is teachers who take their classes outside are found to have less burnout than teachers who are inside all the time. I mean, I think that's true for most of us. Next slide, please. So one of these programs that Openlands has done for a long time with many of the Space to Grow and Building School Garden Schools is a program called Birds in My Neighborhood, where it is a volunteer-led program that goes into the classroom and really just starts doing inquiry-based learning. What do you know about a bird? Have you seen birds? Do you know any names of birds? And then slowly getting the kids outside and then into a natural area. Of course, that couldn't happen this year. Next slide, please. So we've changed it up. We now have created online materials so that teachers can actually teach this, since volunteers can't go into the classroom. But we've also found other things that people can do. They could set up a bird watching station, putting a piece of fruit outside and see what happens, what birds come there. We've also been working with one of the CPS teachers, he calls himself Mr. Science, to create videos that shows kids how to get outside with their families and be able to find birds. Next slide, please. Part of our program has always been to, take the students out to natural areas to look at birds, and then also take families out with them on weekends to some of the bigger natural areas around us, from Hackmatack Wildlife Refuge to Indiana Dunes. But right now we can't do that and put everyone on a bus either. So next slide, please. So we've changed it up. We are now using that bus money that we used to use and giving out stipends to families who are really engaged in this so that they could use that money to buy lunch or buy gas or whatever they need to actually get out there into nature in maybe somewhere further away from their neighborhood that they could do as a family. And this helps to build a really strong bond and connection, because once families start doing it, it usually continues. Next slide, please. And then our Space to Grow schoolyards have always had access to vegetable gardening and native gardens. And because these are closed off right now, we couldn't access this. Next slide, please. But instead, Healthy Schools Campaign and Openlands, along with, I think, 10 other partners, started a program called Chicago Grows Food this last year. It's called Grow Your Own Groceries, where you get one of these little bags with fresh, clean soil, a small seedling in it, a seed packet, and they have been able to distribute thousands of them through some of the free lunch programs through schools. And then teachers have been able to utilize that as a teaching tool. You know, a lot of people either maybe live in apartments that don't necessarily have access to a garden. Maybe they don't have healthy soil to grow food in. They don't have access maybe to a community garden. This was a way to initiate kind of getting your hands dirty and getting in mud, and also having access and learning about growing your own healthy food. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. So this was the end result, which I just think looks so lovely from the Nature Play Day we did. And so I am going to be working with my staff, Danielle Russell, also with Robin and Sean, to have an online webinar. We're calling it Nature Play 101 Workshop. It's going to be April 21st at 4 p.m. And I don't know if Danielle, you could send out the link in the chat there. If not, you could always go onto Openlands website, and it will soon be on there to register for this, to learn a lot more about the basics of nature play and why it's so good. And then maybe we'll have a 102 in person where we get to watch kids do that. Thank you. Next slide. I'm sorry, I missed that one.
Thank you so much, Sean and Daniella and Robin. There's so much enthusiasm in the stage chat for what you presented today, sort of from top to bottom. So what we want to do, since we did run out of time for the Q&A, like I mentioned in the stage chat, we've opened up a session. And in the session, which you can access on the left side of your screen, you can go and join Robin and Daniella and Sean for some live Q&A right now, if you would like to go ahead and do that. And then they'll have a chance to answer some questions and answers. Also, for those of you who've joined us this morning on the stage, over in the sessions, you will have the opportunity, if you like, to share your audio and video and have a conversation with Sean and Daniella and Robin